Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume. I stand here not just in strong opposition to this bill, but in strong opposition to recent efforts by this administration to take over, literally take over, American elections. But not just any American election, this American election. The one that is happening now. Ballots have already been mailed overseas and military voters for several state primaries. I'm opposed to this bill, to any effort by the President of the United States to nationalize a federal election for partisan purposes, because I believe in this country. I ardently, fiercely believe that the United States, the shining city on a global hill, represents the best humanity has to offer. I believe the United States should, it must, stand in defense of and on behalf of every single American. Our republic was founded on the simple yet revolutionary idea that our American government derives its power from the consent of the governed, from the votes of the people. Yet achieving that idea has required struggle over generations and generations. With the Reconstruction Amendments, the 19th Amendment, America expanded its right to vote. Americans have defended this right against efforts to restrict access to the ballot, to pull back from history's progress. Congress has repeatedly affirmed and defended the ability for every American to participate in our elections, including through the passage of the historic Voting Rights Act of 1965. The principle of government with the consent of the governed is why we're all here today. The principle is what we swore an oath to defend. But this Republican majority has made a sharp turn away from that sacred principle. This bill, which we are considering today, represents a betrayal of every representative principle of this country, because passage of this bill, support for it from within this chamber, would be a tacit endorsement of a broader, ominous, dangerous agenda. The Save America Act is not an isolated piece of policy. It is part of a concerted effort by the Republican Party's leadership and this administration, this president, to centralize partisan power over American elections, to diminish the authority of American states, to once again stoke fear and mistrust of immigrants and in our electoral system, all for the partisan gain of Speaker Johnson and the White House this November. Just days ago, President Trump publicly called on Republicans to take over, to nationalize voting across the country. This is not hyperbole. This is not hysteria. These are his words. So it should not surprise anyone that the Save America Act would require states to provide sensitive personal voter data to Kristi Noem's Department of Homeland Security, to send your personal data directly to the federal government, to directly invade your privacy, your family's privacy. And why does the president want to send your information to DHS? Why does he want to take over this election? Why would he advocate for Republican control of federal elections, a direct affront to the United States Constitution? Because he knows that without such drastic action, Republicans will lose the midterm elections in 9 months. Just look at recent election results in Virginia. I know the president has. Look at them in New Jersey. Look at them in Texas. Americans know that everything in this country has gotten more expensive under this administration. So it should be no surprise that this bill would make voting more expensive, because passports, which millions of Americans don't have but would need to register to vote, cost $130. But beyond the cost, these Republican efforts to nationalize how we vote have nothing to do to safeguard our elections. Instead, they threaten the very fabric of American self-government. Now, ensuring the integrity of elections is not only legitimate, it is American. But integrity is achieved through the rule of law, through adherence to our Constitution, through trust in the American people, of the electorate. The security of our elections is not advanced, however, by a Department of Justice under Attorney General Bondi that sends an extraordinary, extortionate letter to Minnesota officials. She suggested violence by federal agents in the Twin Cities would only end if Minnesota just turned over sensitive voter data to the federal government, violating your privacy, demanding your information at the barrel of a Border Patrol rifle. The same data the Save America Act would force every state in this nation to surrender. This letter, the president's rhetoric, their push for Americans' personal voter data, none of this can be divorced from the legislative push we see here today. And we all know why. The Save America Act is part of a comprehensive Republican strategy to cement power this year. Speaker Johnson wants to make it harder for Americans to vote, easier for Washington Republicans to control how elections are run. But let us not forget that elections in this country are administered by clerks, by secretaries of state, and by commissions and bipartisan boards chosen by citizens in every single community in America. They are not run out of the Oval Office. They are not dictated to by partisan interests. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to oppose the Save America Act. I implore them to reject efforts that would centralize control in the hands of Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, or Kristi Noem, or over how Americans vote, over who is allowed to vote. And most of all, I urge this chamber to reaffirm its commitment to the fundamental democratic principles that all eligible citizens should have the opportunity to participate in free, fair, and secure elections without unnecessary burdens and without partisan interference. I strongly urge defeat of this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York, Mr. Morelle, reserves. The gentleman from Wisconsin is